Good evening, I'm Carrie and this is Student Loan Chit-Chat. If I look a little bit tired, it's because I am recording this after work, but I really want to get student debt stories and opinions pushed out on this channel because I think it's something that enough people just don't talk about. And I think the more it's discussed, it will help shape people's opinions about student loans and perhaps help them to make better decisions on how they go about pursuing their collegiate education. All right, so this story is actually from Tuesday, January 26th, 2021, but I think it's more relevant than ever today. So it's titled, "Canceling Student Debt is Unfair to Graduates Like Me Who Sacrificed to Pay Off Our Loans." It was written on January 26, 2021. So here we go. "I gave up a lot to accomplish what I did, but debt forgiveness would punish taxpayers like me for our hard work and frugality." Now, but before I get too far into this story, I want to say that I can understand people's viewpoints about dealing with the debt forgiveness, about people who paid off their debt while other people are getting theirs forgiven. And I actually have a lot of opinions on this article. And of course, they are my opinions. So I'm going to try to get through most of this article and hold off my comments till the end of the article. All right, so here we go. This is by Matthew. "A year after graduating from college, I was able to pay off my student loans in full. Now President Biden wants me to pay for my peers who have yet to do the same." And keep in mind, this was written before the $10,000 and $20,000 loan forgiveness was recently given. "Biden's platform includes student loan forgiveness of at least $10,000 per person. Meanwhile, Democratic Senators Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer have proposed $50,000 in debt forgiveness per individual. On its surface, this sounds generous. American student loan debt is nearing $1.6 trillion, and the cost of college is higher than ever. But what does this forgiveness entail on a moral level? Loans are not forgiven or magically disappeared. They are paid off by taxpayers, whether it is through higher taxes, printing more money, or contributing directly from the national debt. You and I will end up being the ones that pay for it. The United States is already over $27 trillion in debt and $125 trillion deep in unfunded liabilities. Essentially, the debt burden is shifted off of the shoulders of those who signed the loans and onto everyone who pays federal taxes. If you're like me, that's fundamentally unfair." Okay, he's got a point there. He's got some technical points. He's absolutely correct. The debt burden is shifted off the shoulders of those who signed the loans. I admit, I actually was originally an $85,000 student loan, intended to pay it off. That was my full intention. Life occurred, like it usually does, and over 16 years, it grew to $110,000. He's right. It definitely does shift to the taxpayers. I cannot argue that. I will argue, however, if I think it's fundamentally unfair. "Paying off my student loans was a concerted effort that took sacrifice. I started working after graduating from, I think it's called SUNY, Alabama in 2018, following Dave Ramsey's financial plan. I cut my living expenses, took on a side gig, and threw all that I could at my $27,000 in student loans." Now, in the world of student loans, $27,000 is like a dream. It's a blessing. Of course, again, if you're a young person starting out, that's still a lot of money. But in relation to what other people are taking in student loans, it's actually a very modest amount and is doable. "I cooked my own meals and bought the most affordable groceries. Although I could afford an apartment, I chose to live in subsidized company housing 1.5 hours away from my workplace. Commuting for 15 hours a week was part of the price I paid to square my debt sooner. I packed lunch most days, even when I had to wake up early to do so. It saved money at the cost of the convenience of eating out. Some nights after work, I stayed up late to do freelance translation work instead of enjoying leisure time. I gave up a lot to accomplish what I did, but debt forgiveness would punish taxpayers like me for our hard work and frugality, just so others don't have to take responsibility for their own choices. Rather than stopping at saying that student loan forgiveness is unfair, it is, or that we can't afford it, we can't, we should take a deeper look at the root of the debate surrounding student loans. The student loan forgiveness camp is operating from the assumption that people are entitled to a college education and other people's hard work. It codifies in policy the idea that adults are not responsible for their own actions, i.e. taking on debt. In a free society, I am not entitled to a college education, and neither is anyone else. Taking out a loan is a choice, and personal responsibility shouldn't be supplanted by taxpayer bailouts. Canceling student loans means penalizing people like me for honoring my word and repaying the debt I chose to accept. All right, and this is by Matthew. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his last name. Noyes, it looks like. All right. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a deep breath, because Matthew definitely has valid points. The student loan forgiveness is funded by taxpayers. Somebody has to pay it. And if you've watched my other videos, especially the first early ones I made under the name Student Loan Chit-Chat, I acknowledge, yes, it is definitely, especially public service loan forgiveness, it is funded by the taxpayers. My loan is not being forgiven just magically. And I completely agree with that. However, I would like to make some comments about Matthew and basically some of my thoughts as I was reading this. Okay. So acknowledging that, yes, it's funded by the taxpayers. Let's go ahead and kind of start from the beginning here. In regards to the public service loan forgiveness, that is the PSLF. Now, I'm just going to focus right this minute on PSLF, and then I'll kind of expand it to focus on all student loans. And now, of course, this does not apply to private student loans, because private student loans, they're private and they're not under federal loan guidelines. But as far as the public service loan forgiveness, such as myself getting a $110,000 student loan cancellation, which I'm just waiting for the final letter on, I have met all the 120 requirements. I can tell you that when I got my loan, and it was in about 2004, right around there. I think it was about 2004, 2005. I graduated, I believe it was approximately 2006, because I started teaching in the fall of 2006. The PSLF program wasn't even in existence. And if it was in existence, nobody knew about it, because it wasn't until 2011, almost 4 years after I went into education, that anybody at Fed Loan, which is my public loan servicer, it wasn't until 2011 that anyone at Fed Loan even told me about it. So I can tell you from a personal standpoint, Matthew, as far as me getting $110,000 student loan forgiveness, I went into education not because of the forgiveness. The forgiveness didn't even exist at the time. So I think it's important to remember that most of the people, at least in my opinion, okay, most of the people who are getting these big loan forgivenesses, and even the small ones, they were in education or nursing or military or firefighter, police. They were in those occupations long before or shortly before this program even came to light. Yes, there were programs that were, if you could teach for 5 years, say in a disadvantaged school, you might get $5,000. Those have been around for forever. I knew about it. I never pursued it. I wasn't looking for anyone to pay my debt. But life does happen. I think it's important to remember that a lot of the forgiveness you see of the people who have met their 10 years like me, I've been actually in education 16 years, and I'm in my 17th year right now. I know people who have been teaching upwards of 25, 30 years. Yes, still with debt. And they're applying for the program. I think we need to get out of the idea of thinking that these people who are applying for loan forgiveness, such as under the public service loan forgiveness program, we need to stop thinking that all of these people, we timed our debt and we timed our degrees just to make sure that we could get 10 years in and call it done. No, most people I know have taught 20, 25, 30 years. They're still holding on to debt. And so this PSLF program is a way for them to wipe out their debt. But in no means did they do it simply under 10 years. Also, you talk about public housing and how I think it was you drove a couple hours, hour and a half a day to commute back and forth to public housing. All right. I think it's great that your employer offered that. If you really want to get technical, you could say that was Section 8 housing just paid for by your company. In some ways, is that really any different than subsidized housing by the government? Now, you might say, well, yes, it is, because you work at a job and they pay for it. But you know what? Even tax dollars for things that I don't necessarily support, or things that aren't advantageous to me, I support it with my tax dollars. Perhaps Section 8 housing, even though some people might think that's bad, well, in some ways, those taxpayers did pay for it somewhere along their working years, working life. Okay, maybe not. Maybe some of us paid into, say, Section 8 housing support more years than others, but in some way or another, we've all paid into it. Even the people who live in Section 8 have probably, in some point or another, paid federal taxes that supported that. I think it's neat that your company gave you the opportunity to have housing. Subsidized housing is what I think you called it. I think if a lot of people on the student loan program could get subsidized housing, I'm willing to bet it could have or would alter their life financially, like it helped alter your life. You clearly did the math on it, and it was worth the commute to go into subsidized housing for you. I think it's neat that your company offered it. I wish more companies would offer it. And perhaps that subsidized housing was what actually made the difference in your ability to pay off your student loan. Because housing, as we all know, is one of the most expensive things, if not the most expensive thing in people's budget, at least until, the mortgage is paid off. You say it was to your advantage to drive 2 hours daily. Okay, let me back up again. On the public housing, yes, it was to your advantage. You did the math. It was worth it. And guess what? It was worth to your company's advantage too, to have you drive 2 hours a day versus perhaps, let's say, paying you more. Perhaps your company should have just simply paid you more and they wouldn't have had to subsidize wherever it was you live. Now, I don't know if your housing was subsidized by your company. I'm assuming it was. So I apologize if that's not the case. But either way, your subsidized housing, I guarantee, made a big difference. And a lot of people, especially low income, on student loans, if they could get subsidized housing, I guarantee you it could make the difference between making their student loan and paying it off, or just always feeling like they're living paycheck to paycheck. I'm going to admire your frugality. You pack your lunch. You did everything right as far as frugality. However, I'm not trying to sound cruel here. I'm not going to give you any more kudos for being frugal over other people I know that are frugal. I have worn clothes until there were holes in them because I was on such a tight budget. I have eaten oatmeal for dinner because I was trying to be frugal. I don't know anyone, at least in my circle of friends, the average income earners, okay, just your public service employee types. I don't know anybody that actually wastes money. I hope the screen light isn't going off. If it is, I do apologize. I understand that you're frugal, but you talk about your frugality, in my opinion, to some extent, like somehow or another you are more frugal than anybody else is. No, I don't think you're more frugal than anybody else is, okay? Most people I know are pretty frugal, especially now more than ever with inflation being what it is. But coming up with a list of, well, I pack my lunches and I do this and I do that. Well, congratulations. It might get you a little closer to heaven, okay? And maybe a seat ahead of me, all right? I'll accept that. But I can tell you that I'm pretty frugal, and I can tell you that the people I know are also pretty frugal. It just so happened that during the 17 years, because I'm in my 17th year of teaching, this program came along to forgive my debt. I think it would be foolish of me not to take that opportunity, and I think it would be foolish of anyone not to take that opportunity. And possibly even you would have taken that opportunity too if you felt it would change your life. So frugality is great, but I don't want to overplay it that the only people who are frugal are the people who are paying off their debt and everybody else is living the high life. All right? No, they're not living the high life. But I do admire and respect your frugality, without a doubt. But most people I know are pretty frugal, myself included. All right. Used to talk about personal responsibility in taking out your loans and paying it back. Yep. I agree there's personal responsibility in taking out loans and paying it back. But I also believe that there's personal responsibility in giving out loans. That means in giving out Parent Plus loans and not really telling parents that it's not based on your income. They'll pretty much give you what they want. I think there's a personal responsibility in corporations handing out, I don't know, what is it? The last YouTube video I just did, $250,000 in student loans to a 25-year-old. I think there's personal responsibility, and it goes both ways. It goes out to the people who take out the loans, and it goes to the people who lend out the money. But I think it's a little bit, what's the word? Everything seems to fall under personal responsibility. Yes, but if you also know that you're financially binded by your situation, I think you have a personal responsibility to find out how to get out of it. And if you can get out of it and it's legal, guess what? I think you should probably do it. I am personally responsible for my $110,000 student loan. I will absolutely admit that I'm personally responsible. And I've maintained my student loan payments. I was never in arrears. But chances are I would most likely retire with this loan if it wasn't for the PSLF program to help me take it away. The program happened to come along while I was teaching. It happened to start a year after I graduated, unbeknownst to me, as I told you earlier. So part of personal responsibility is when you take out a loan and you find that you can't afford it, well, then you have a personal responsibility to figure out what you can do to make sure you can either afford it or clear it. And I don't want to judge anyone, but if that personal responsibility means, hey, you know what? There's a program, the federal government has released it. I'm going to be personally responsible, and I'm going to read up about the program. I'm going to find out if I qualify. I'm going to apply according to the rules and procedures. I'm going to follow all the rules and procedures. And if it works out in my favor, that's wonderful. That too is personal responsibility. I have taken personal responsibility for it. I've even taken responsibility in making sure that other people know about it. Personal responsibility isn't always as simple as, well, you just simply pay off your debt. Sometimes we take personal responsibility in other ways, in ways that we live and learn. You talk about honoring your word and repaying your debt. Okay, Matthew, you can crawl down off your cross at this point. Okay, yes, I understand you have honored your word and you've repaid your debt. But may I also note that you talk about Dave Ramsey and how you followed his financial steps. I am very familiar with Dave Ramsey. I really like Dave Ramsey. I think for people who are first learning how to deal with money, I think Dave Ramsey is wonderful. But let's talk about personal responsibility here. It's no secret that Dave Ramsey, who was initially, and I believe it was really early, in his early mid-20s, if I'm correct, was in real estate, was high flying with real estate, multi-millionaire at some ridiculously young age, went bankrupt. He went bankrupt. But you follow him. Why? He took on debts that he could not pay. You talk about personal responsibility and taking out loans and paying that back. He couldn't do it. Does that mean he wasn't personally responsible? And if he's not personally responsible, why are you following him? Why do you admire him so much? He failed in that category. If I take what your article says at face value, he failed as much as I failed, or I can say I failed as much as he failed. He filed bankrupt. Did he not honor his word? Did he not honor his debt? Make that commitment? Was he perhaps not frugal enough? Was he not as frugal as you were? So when we talk about personal responsibility isn't as easily defined, like I said earlier, as just simply paying off your debt. It comes in different ways, different opportunities. I admire Dave Ramsey a lot, and I think it's great that you follow him. But if you look at the words you use to describe people who do not or have not and will not be paying off their student loans, you say they lack personal responsibility. You say basically they're not honoring their word. Then why are you following Dave Ramsey? Just something to think about. I hope, and I'm not saying you're bitter, okay? But I hope that if there is bitterness towards the people like me that are getting our loans paid, I hope that doesn't hold you back in your happiness, as it should not. But let me also say, we pay into things that we are not ever going to benefit from. So let me give you this quick little analogy here. Let's imagine that you build a road. This is something I kind of, thought of the other day. You're a road builder. And you basically, your job is to go out and create roads. But let's say road builders refused to build roads that they weren't going to travel. You want me to build a road to the beach? I'm never going to visit that beach. I'm never going to see that sunset. You want me to build a road into the mountains with the highest house on the hill? Well, I'm never going to be able to live in that house. If you're a road builder, you build roads because you can. Not necessarily because you're going to ever travel that road. Not because you're ever going to benefit directly. What I see in this article, I guess that, I won't say it's, disturbing, that's a bit strong, but maybe a little unsettling, is I see a lot of, I did this, and all these people around me getting student loan forgiveness, PSLF, whatever, they didn't do what I do. They didn't build the road that I built. They should have the things that I have because they couldn't build the same road. We build roads for each other through the tax dollars we pay. We build roads for each other by sharing our information and our knowledge with people. Imagine if the only roads road builders would build are the roads that they could enjoy, the roads that they could travel down, and they rejected everything else. As a taxpayer, I don't agree with everything my taxes go to. Absolutely do not. But I understand that I'm building paths to other people's happiness. I understand that my tax dollars may set someone else free, someone I never even knew about. I choose not to live my life based on looking at, what I paid into and what someone else didn't have to pay into. And I'm not saying that your publication is without, justification. It is. Yes, you paid your $27,000, you lived frugally, and everything worked just right for you. But other people can do the same thing and everything does not work just right for them. Does that make them careless? Does it make them, irresponsible and not willing to admit their debt, not willing to pay it? No, not at all. It doesn't make them any less honorable. And I think the issue that I have is, in some ways, this is a lot of, I did this, and you didn't do that. Therefore, you are less than because I did not. Give me public housing and I probably would not have had any issues with my student loan. Set me up so I never got divorced. I probably wouldn't have had any issues with my student loan. Okay? Life simply happens. And when we can only look at what we've done and we fail to look at, maybe other people are in different life circumstances, different situations. Okay? So I respect, and I even will acknowledge that, yes, your article definitely has merit. You did pay your loan and you paid it in full. You did it on your own and you took the opportunities like public housing. Okay. And you may have had some opportunities even before you went to school that you didn't have to take out $100,000. I mean, I don't know your situation. Maybe you had people who guided you better in school. Perhaps the other article I did, the 25-year-old had no guide. She didn't have the same opportunities. No two students and no two student loans are exactly alike. So these are just my thoughts on this. I thank the taxpayers, and I thank you, Matthew, for being one of the taxpayers to help pay off my student loan. I hope being in education, just rounding the corner in a couple years of 20 years, and if you have kids, choose to have a family, I will be more than happy to be their teacher, and I will be more than happy to have my tax dollars go towards their education. I will vote for every school benefit I possibly can. And guess what, Matthew? I don't have any kids, and I never will, and that's okay. But if I can pave a road that helps benefit your kids, I absolutely will. And it doesn't matter if I ever see the sunset. What matters is, did you see it? And that's okay. I'm Carrie. This is Student Loan Chit-Chat. I hope you'll subscribe. Have a good night.